Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in New York as another major midterm matchup is set after last night's dramatic results out of Texas, where Attorney General Ken Paxton delivered a Texas-sized drubbing over Republican Senator John Cornyn, trouncing the four-term incumbent by nearly 30 points in the Senate primary runoff. The result sets up a combative general election showdown with the Democratic candidate, State Representative James Tallarico. Paxton's runaway victory also further solidifying the president's grip over the Republican Party, as Senator Cornyn becomes the latest victim of the president's mission to snuff out perceived disloyalty inside the party. In his victory speech last night, the Attorney General praising the powers of the president's endorsement.
When everyone in Washington told him to abandon me and abandon the people of Texas, he didn't listen. Instead, he gave his complete and total endorsement. President Trump is the leader of our party, and his endorsement in this is the most powerful force in politics.
Paxton also thanking Cornyn for his long career after a bruising primary campaign that saw Senator Cornyn attack the Attorney General for a slate of controversies, including his impeachment by the state's Republican legislature. In his concession speech, Senator Cornyn told his supporters he was disappointed by the result, but said he will support Paxton in November.
Those who show up decide for those who do not. There's a simple rule in elections, you've heard me say it before, and that is the candidate who gets the most votes wins. The party in the majority gets to govern, and my hope is to keep my party in power for generations. And I've always supported the Republican ticket, and I intend to do so again in this general election.
Now all attention turns to the general election, which is already off to a contentious and bitter start. President Trump slamming Tallarico on social media today as a, quote, dumb-ocrat who is, quote, weak on crime after Paxton weaved a string of mocking nicknames through his victory speech last night.
My opponent is the most extreme radical the Democrats have ever nominated. Some people know him as Tofu Tallarico. Some people call him Six-Gender Jimmy. I've even heard some people call him James Tallarico. And others refer to him simply as Low T Tallarico. But no matter what you call him, let me tell you this. James Tallarico is a threat to everything we hold dear in this state and in this country.
Tallarico responding with his own attacks against Paxton while also trying to distance himself from past comments on hot-button cultural issues. Here's what he told my NBC colleague Ryan Chandler earlier today.
Ken Paxton is the most corrupt politician in America. He is abnormal. His crimes are egregious. And he is everything that's wrong with our broken system. I'll be the first to admit that I missed the mark on some of those old statements. But what Ken Paxton is doing is clipping my cringy comments to distract from his career of corruption. Ken Paxton has a criminal record. I have a legislative record. So while he tries to divide us with the same old, tired culture war fights, I'm going to keep bringing Texans together to tackle corruption and lower our costs.
Now, here are the stakes, folks. Democrats haven't won a statewide race in Texas in more than 30 years. But after last night, our friends at the Cook Political Report moved the race in Democrats' direction from likely Republican to lean Republican. Joining me now from the White House is NBC's Monica Alba. Steve Kornacki is breaking down last night's results at the big board. Also with us, Phil Prazin, reporter and co-anchor of Lone Star Politics on our Dallas-Fort Worth affiliate, and Jessica Taylor, Senate and Governor's editor at the Cook Political Report. Thanks to all of you for starting us off. There is so much to unpack in this Texas-sized story. Monica, I have to start with you at the White House. This is the third Trump target to lose their primary in just the last week, and the second senator. So take us inside your conversations inside the West Wing. What is the strategy moving forward here, Mon?
Well, look, Kristen, the White House is completely emboldened by this, as is President Trump, buoyed by that victory, where they feel that the decisions that the president is making, his so-called revenge tour, is working, and that even if this is something where they are seeing a short-term gain, where they're seeing these victories of Trump-backed candidates in the short term, even if that raises questions about what that could mean for November, that they feel very good about this strategy, that they have really double and tripled down on it and continue to own it. The president was asked about that earlier today in the cabinet meeting, and he said that this was a tremendous victory, that he was thrilled for this, and really did speak about this in terms that he feels that if he backs someone, that they are kind of unstoppable. Again, that will be a whole new test in the actual general election to come, in the actual overall midterms. But something else that's raising a lot of eyebrows were his overall comments about the midterms today, Kristen, when the president said, I don't care about the midterms in terms of Iran specifically, even though we know a lot of voters could feel pretty differently when they head to the polls. Kristen.
No doubt about that, Monica. Those comments will likely get a lot of attention and traction throughout the course of the midterms. I do want to ask you, Monica, what you are anticipating seeing from this president based on your reporting. He's already committed significant time and resources to the primaries. Do you anticipate that that's what folks will see in the general election as well?
It does seem that way. He wrote on his social media platform that he would be holding big rallies for Ken Paxton in the fall. So we do expect he will be traveling at some point. Whether he's going to be doing that for all of the candidates that he has put his support behind is a little bit unclear. Remember that earlier this year, the White House had sort of expected the president to be traveling domestically about once a week. But then the war against Iran started, and that has shifted that kind of domestic travel and priorities a little bit. So we'll see if that changes, but the White House and the president indicating it will ramp up closer to November.
And Monica, I have to ask you about this YOLO caucus, you only live once caucus, these senators, members of Congress who've been ousted by President Trump. Are they worried about that, Senator Cornyn potentially joining that caucus and blocking President Trump's legislative priorities?
Yeah, because we've already seen examples of that in the last couple of weeks with Senator Cassidy, of course, of Louisiana, who did join some Democrats on that war powers resolution, for instance. But specifically with Senator Cornyn, it's interesting because the language that the president used was pretty actually he praised him. He was pretty kind compared to some of the other comments he has made about Republicans like Senator Cassidy or Congressman Thomas Massie that he has worked to oust. So specifically with Senator Cornyn, he said that he has had a very long, strong, and truly great career. He sort of thanked him and said he will, quote, remain my friend for a long time to come, which also raises questions about whether the president sort of feels like he needs him more on his side in the coming months as he finishes out his term. Kristen.
Monica Alba starting us off at the White House. Monica, thank you so much for your great reporting as always. Steve, let me turn to you. You're at the big board there. Take us inside the numbers. Paxton just dominated this runoff, bigger than I think a lot of people were actually anticipating. How did he do it? And was the Trump endorsement the thing that made the difference, or did it just push him up even more?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, pardon me, Kristen, I think it's the margin here in particular, obviously, nearly 30 points. Pardon me, I apologize for that. Nearly 30 points here for Paxton over Cornyn. And you look at this, remember, the preliminary, when these two candidates faced off initially, this is what it looked like. Cornyn got the most votes. Cornyn had actually finished first in the preliminary. So this was a massive, massive shift from the preliminary at the start of March to this. Now, you can look at these results and say, I think even without that Trump win, you could make a case on these without that Trump endorsement. You could make a case Paxton was going to win. Why do I say that? It's because the way Texas reports its vote out last night, they report the early vote out first in all these counties. And what we were seeing when they reported out that early vote was massive Paxton margins. They weren't quite as big as his vote was with the election day vote, but he was winning the early vote overwhelmingly. And why is that key? Because a lot of that early vote, not all of it, but a significant chunk of that early vote was actually cast before Donald Trump made his endorsement, about a week out before this runoff. So I think there's some indications when you look at that early vote that Paxton was already starting to run away with this thing. But that Trump endorsement, again, probably pushed this thing up more than it would have been, nearly 30 points. You do not see incumbent senators lose primaries every day. You especially don't see them lose by this kind of margin every day.
Well, it's just fascinating to go inside the numbers and that early vote, Steve, which, as you say, is critical. And of course, your voice is scratchy. You were broadcasting all night long. We would expect nothing less of you. Let me ask you about turnout, because it was, relatively speaking, fairly light. Is it possible that Paxton may have reached his ceiling? What are you going to be watching for in the general based on what you saw last night?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think there's the concern that some Republican leaders expressed about Paxton's electability. One thing you'd look at this, you'd say Republican voters themselves don't seem that concerned with it. That was the entire message from Cornyn in the stretch of this campaign to Republican voters was, if you nominate Paxton, you're putting this seat, at risk here. You're giving the Democrats a chance to win a statewide race in Texas. When you see a margin like this, clearly Republican voters themselves don't seem to share that sentiment too much. Look, ultimately, you could talk about where this race stands sort of in ratings and everything, but as you say, it has been 32 years since a Democrat won a statewide race in Texas. So while there are some fissures in this party right now, obviously, coming out of this, there were some harsh words exchanged and everything. The idea of being the Republican in Texas running against a Democrat has been an extremely reliable formula now for decades, really a generation. So that's what Democrats are up against, and that's what Paxton's going to be relying on here as he tries to unite the party coming out of this.
Well, we're going to be watching every twist and turn right along with you, Steve. Thank you so much. Phil, let me head out to you in Dallas. We have to start with the Senate race, right where I left off with Steve. Ken Paxton, James Tallarico, you just heard Steve talking about this. We can't say it enough. A Democrat hasn't won this seat in more than 30 years. It's been the white whale, the great white whale for Democrats. Has that now changed? Is Texas now in play?
Let me put it to you like this, Kristen. I mean, Texas is a Republican state until proven otherwise, but I'll make a movie reference that you make. You know Philadelphia. Right now, we are in the first Rocky 1. James Tallarico can go the distance. It will. it is my favorite as well. But James Tallarico can go the distance. It is possible. There is a path for him to win. I know this because there was a big gathering of Republican data gurus and data experts. They have someone nicknamed a nerd summit about a week and a half ago, where they looked at the numbers and then they told their Republican bosses, the governor, speaker of the House, lieutenant governor, what the situation is. And the environment is so bad for Republicans right now, even in Texas, with how the economy is, how people feel about the economy, and then the president's approval rating. Even in Texas, it is possible that a Democrat can win statewide. But for that to happen, this needs to be Rocky 2, and then that path goes through the Cornyn voters, those independent and moderate Republicans that usually vote Republican, that may be convinced to not vote for Ken Paxton. And we've talked about this before, Kristen. The closest thing they've come to this was in 2018 with Beto O'Rourke, where 400,000 Texans voted for the Democrat Beto O'Rourke and Governor Greg Abbott, the Republican. So Tallarico needs to get that population back and then more some. So it is a challenge, but it is possible.
I anticipate they are studying the O'Rourke playbook as we speak. Phil, let me ask you, because what we are seeing so far, this is day one, is some really ugly rhetoric back and forth. Just how bitter are you anticipating this campaign's going to get, Phil?
It is going to be pretty nasty. I mean, already you're seeing there are already kind of negative feelings about Ken Paxton from $100 million from John Cornyn, right? But what you're going to see from Tallarico and his team, they're going to try and connect people's feelings about corruption in Washington and corruption in Austin to their higher gas prices, to their higher cost of living. And, you even see today Tallarico calling Ken Paxton part of the Epstein class. That's the first time I've heard him use those words regarding Ken Paxton. So they are going to try and make the argument that your life is worse because they're corrupt. And Ken Paxton, Republicans have given them a lot of ammunition by beating up Ken Paxton so much. In response, you're already seeing it. You're going to see the nicknames. You're going to see the Republicans try and frame Tallarico as just out of touch with Texans, and that worked in 2024, especially on the transgender issue. They really hit Colin Allred hard on that and made him look kind of out of touch with the majority of Texans. The big question, though, is will Texans put up with what they did in 2024 and 2026? Will those attacks on his past transgender and race comments, will they be as powerful when gas prices are so high? They have an argument to make. They've been successful at that in the past, and I guess we're going to have to find out if it works yet again.
Well, it's a great question, a great series of questions, Phil. Let me ask you very quickly. Democrats in the Texas 35th District rejecting Maureen Galindo. She had been under fire for anti-Semitic remarks. Their nominee, Johnny Garcia, set to face off against Carlos de la Cruz. How do you see this playing out? Could Democrats be competitive in this district, Phil?
It is. It is one of the districts that Republicans designed to win, but they used a lot of those 2024 presidential numbers. And it's just going to be a different situation here in 2026. So right now it performs about 55%. Designed for a Republican to win with 55% of the vote. But that was back in 2024. If there's a 5 or 6 point difference or different environment, then yes, a Democrat can pick that seat up. Also, probably another 1 or 2 in the Valley. Republicans will still come out on top because they changed 5 seats around to theoretically go Republican. But Democrats may win 1, 2, maybe 3, but then we're getting kind of pushing it.
All right. Well, Phil, we're going to watch it right along with you. And of course, I get to talk to you every Friday. Thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. Jessica, let me turn to you. Thank you so much for being here. For people who love politics, we hang on every single word of the Cook Political Report. So let's talk about this rating change, likely Republican to lean Republican. Explain why that's so significant.
Well, I mean, a lot of this is Republicans, national Republicans, even before this race was over, saying that Ken Paxton was going to cost them perhaps $200 to $250 million to try to save this race, that they saw him as the weaker nominee than John Cornyn. And basically, we agreed. But notably, as Phil was talking about, this is still not an easy race for Democrats, even with a lot of things in the environment that they got the weaker candidate rather than John Cornyn. We still see Ken Paxton as having an advantage. Now, it's a narrower advantage than I think someone like Cornyn would have had. But that's why the race is in lean Republican, and it's not yet in the toss-up column. But if some of these attacks on Tallarico that we're already seeing today, if they don't stick, if gas prices get even higher, if Donald Trump's approval rating gets even lower in Texas, this race could absolutely come more online and could move into the toss-up column.
Well, and it's put Republicans in a little bit of a tough spot. Of course, for example, the Republican Senate Campaign Committee campaigned on behalf of Senator Cornyn. They've had some sharp attacks against Paxton. What will this look like in a general election? They've basically laid the groundwork for Tallarico to take all of this material and throw it back in Paxton's face.
Yeah, you actually had the National Republican Senatorial Committee that is, made light of Ken Paxton's divorces, or his divorce, his infidelity, his impeachment and different things. They were deleting press releases off of their site last night where they had attacked Paxton. They've got to work with him. He's got to mend fences with leader John Thune. Axios is reporting that the two will meet soon, that there is an outreach there. But John Cornyn is a very well-liked member of the caucus. But this is a seat that they've got to save come November. I think the most important impact that I see is, again, with the money. Where is that money going to come from? Is it going to come from other races that they would like to put into play, like a Minnesota or a New Hampshire, perhaps even a Georgia, that they really needed to put into play in order to gain seats or even just to defend seats? I think this is just a real pickle that they're in. It might have to come from sort of the president's super PAC as well. Some of it, you broke it, you bought it in a way.
So, Jessica, big picture, what does this mean for the map overall as we watch these midterms unfold?
Everything still has to go right for Democrats in order for them to get the 4 seats, but this is only good news for Democrats as they do try to pick up the Senate, which is still significantly harder than the House math.
All right. Well, we appreciate your analysis very much. Jessica, thank you so much for being here. We're going to dive deeper into the fallout from Texas a little bit later in the show. But coming up, meet the candidate on a quest to revive the Kennedy dynasty. Jack Schlossberg, the grandson of John F. Kennedy, with an eclectic social media following, is running for Congress here in New York. He joins me in studio. That interview is next. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. Get comfortable. Welcome back. We are less than a month away now from the closely watched Democratic primary in New York's 12th district to fill retiring Congressman Jerry Nadler's seat. The race has attracted a crowd of candidates, including 2 New York Assembly members, the ex-husband of Trump's former campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway, George Conway, and Jack Schlossberg, the grandson of President John F. Kennedy. Schlossberg launched his campaign after making a name for himself online for his viral political satire videos. Here's a sampling.
Newsflash! Republicans are lying.
Hey, JD. It's me. I'm at the pump.
Dear President Putin, every child shares the same quiet dreams.
A lot of people talking about Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
We gotta call them out and fight fire with fire.
And joining me now on set is Jack Schlossberg. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, it's wonderful to have you. We really appreciate it. Looking forward to the conversation. So many people do know you from your TikToks, of course, your family name. Why do you think you're qualified to represent New York's 12th congressional district?
I think I'm running a campaign like every Democrat across the country needs to, and that is because our base and the most dedicated members of our party do not like the influence of money in our politics. I don't have a super PAC. I don't take any corporate PAC money from special interests. And this race is being flooded with money from other parts of the country. A guy named Alex Borres, he has $5 million or more from a company called Anthropic, and also has taken $3.5 million from Chris Larson, the second highest donor to President Trump's inauguration, who is currently funding MAGA Republican candidates across the country. And they're also funding Mr. Borres. Meanwhile, Mr. Lasher, assemblyman from the Upper West Side, he has a super PAC that spends about $1 million a week. I don't have that. People right now want to trust their elected officials. I've experienced more than anybody breaking through, elevating the profile of the issues that matter most to our party. And, I've got a legal education and a lifetime of working very hard on the issues that I care about.
Well, and as you know, one of the critiques against you is about how much experience you have. Congressman Jerry Nadler is retiring. You're trying to win his seat, of course. Has been dismissive of your candidacy. He says you don't have a record of public service or a public accomplishment. What would you say to that criticism?
I would say that bad staffing, wasn't briefed very well. I was a delegate to the DNC in 2024. I traveled across the country for the Biden and Harris campaigns as a top Democratic surrogate. I have spent a lifetime representing and working on extending President Kennedy's legacy and the important values that it represents across the world. I have the best education you can get on public policy matters. And I've actually, uniquely among the people running, galvanize young voters and engage them in a political process and help them believe in the Democratic Party again at a time when our future as a party and a country depends on expanding our base, being more persuasive, and galvanizing the very voters that we lost that led to us losing control of all 3 branches of government in 2024. So I would consider that public accomplishment, absolutely. And I would also say that the campaign I'm running right now is evidence of that too. We're running a grassroots political movement here in New York as an outsider in this race. We're doing it without a super PAC, and we are releasing plans, like my plan to have people deduct their rent from their taxes. It could save you a month's worth of rent per year. I've got a plan to make Trump pay for the cost of the perimeter around Trump Tower and invest it in cops, teachers, and transit. I want to make HIV medication free at the point of care. I want to finally put a speed limit on e-bikes. E-bike accidents here in New York increased 86% last year. Meanwhile, the 2 people I'm running against missed half their votes in the same amount of time. So I understand I don't have the record and experience of making deals in Albany, but I think that's exactly why people are gravitating towards our campaign.
You're critical of your challengers for missing votes. Would you commit to attending every vote if you were elected?
I'll commit to showing up every single day for the people of this district and doing absolutely everything I can to deliver for them.
So that's a yes?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let me ask you, staying on this topic of your experience, it was highlighted in a New York Times piece, and it stressed the fact that you have said you have the longest work engagement that has been to be a few months as a political correspondent for Vogue, covering the 2024 campaign, and saying the State Department work you've cited lasted for less than 4 months. How do you explain that to people who read that and have concerns that maybe you don't have the right kind of experience?
They're free to judge for themselves. That's not true, what they wrote there, and I would have told them that.
What part of it's not true?
I worked at the State Department for just under a year, and I left after President Trump won an election. I was a political appointee, and that's how that works when you work in government at the State Department. President Trump, I don't think, was going to reappoint me to a job at the State Department. And I would just say that, look, I'm the last person who expected to go from a JD MBA to be a content creator, but that was the universe's plan for me and my way to contribute and galvanize people on my own. I would also say that it may not look like a traditional work experience to you, but I built my own media company and had tremendous success that other people, in that industry would kill for. And just because I turned down a lot of money to be paid for that content doesn't mean that it doesn't have value.
Let me allow you to respond to another part of the New York Times article, which lists what they call, quote, erratic behavior in your campaign. They cite canceled campaign meetings, firing of consultants without telling them. Is there any truth to those claims?
The story did get one thing right. There is one true thing about that, and that is that I do not have a campaign that's like other campaigns. I was not planning to run for this seat, but it opened up. I had no idea Representative Nadler would retire. This is my home. I grew up here. My family has lived here for 5 generations. I care a lot about this place. And when the seat opened up and the Democratic Party was in shambles as it has been, I decided I had no choice but to run and to figure it out. And, people may not know this sitting at home, but most campaigns, you hire a media consultant, a fundraising consultant, a digital consultant, a compliance consultant, a mail consultant. You ended up with 10 consulting firms. I did that in the beginning because I thought, because I listened to advice, quickly realized not for me. I don't need to hire 10 different groups of people to tell me people care about affordability. I already knew that. And so I decided that wasn't for me. And I don't know, that article, it was a beauty. And if I were one of my opponents, I might have done the same thing. But I would just say that there is absolutely no truth to the idea that we're running a disorganized campaign. I show up and work every single day. If we were running a disorganized campaign, we wouldn't have held a lead in the polls for 4 months after being dismissed as unserious. We wouldn't have raised $3 million from small dollar donors, average contribution of $30. And I'll finish by saying, we wouldn't, if we were so unserious and we were so erratic, then why did we land on the front page?
All right, let's talk about your policy priorities. You want to implement universal health coverage. You want to enhance the child tax credit, as well as, you've said, abolish ICE, root out corruption in the Trump administration, which you just referenced, among a long list of other proposals. It's day one if you get elected. What is the first policy proposal that you focus on?
If New Yorkers could deduct their rent from their taxes, rent's at an all-time high, I'd be very happy. But I will say that I think the fundamental impediment to a progressive agenda is money in politics. It is campaign finance reform. If we don't discontinue the trend that we're on, where billionaires can come in and buy elections, where corporations like Anthropic can try to buy New York 12, this is, a lot of people want to buy the middle of the center of Manhattan. There's a big market out there for billionaires to come in and spend money on it, as evidenced by the spending in this race. And it has a corrupting influence in our party. I like to say, I'm on a regular bike. My opponents are on an e-bike because they've got a super PAC. We've got to ride 100 miles. By the time we get there, who's going to be in better shape? Because when you get to the floor of the House, you can't bring your super PAC with you.
It's interesting because Mayor Mamdani has tried to work with President Trump in some areas. If you were elected, would you try to find ways to work with President Trump? Do you see that as a priority if you thought it would benefit the people of New York and your district?
Absolutely. Of course I would. I would also say that I believe the Democratic Party, and this is something that distinguishes me again from my opponents, I do believe we have to hold the president and his administration accountable for the crimes they've committed, and that impeachment has to be on the table for the Democratic Party right now. I can think of nothing more demoralizing than watching the law be broken in broad daylight, getting to Congress, winning a majority, and not actually doing anything about it, which is why I would want to serve on the Judiciary Committee, because I want to issue a subpoena to find out what is going on with my cousin RFK Jr., why Tylenol, why not Advil, who's paying for the words that come out of his mouth, and how much money have all of these cabinet officials made.
What do you say to Democrats who argue impeachment would only backfire? It would only strengthen President Trump more politically speaking.
I would say we don't have a choice. What's the alternative? It might be difficult. It might come at a cost, but isn't that what we're supposed to be doing as public servants? Is the thing that we believe is the right thing to do? I think it's the right thing to do to say, no, a president can't make $4 billion in his first year and a half in office. That's not okay. We have to hold him to account.
All right, let me ask you about an article that came out today about your views related to Israel. This is in Politico, highlighting what they say is your shifting views on military aid to Israel. They quote you as saying at a recent meet and greet at a private club, quote, I probably would have continued funding Israel's offensive weaponry within the years following October 7th, but you've publicly said you would vote to withhold any offensive weapons to Israel. How do you square those two statements? Which one reflects how you really feel right now?
I mean, I'm not on here to complain about my media coverage, but that story is completely false and taken out of context. And I think it's really important to call a spade a spade. I said the same thing in that room, and the transcript that they have would show it if they had published it, that I say in every single room. That is, my position has evolved just as AOC and Bernie's has evolved after the war in Iran. When the war in Iran broke out, I said I oppose the war. I oppose all funding for the war. That means opposing sending weapons to Israel. I support, however, continued funding for the Iron Dome, because it is primarily a mechanism to defend civilian lives, including the 600,000 Americans who live there. And that's exactly what I said in that room. And the comment that I made that about supporting Israel's efforts in the years following October 7th is something that every Democrat said, or many Democrats said, the majority position in our party, and the situation has fundamentally changed. I was asked a hypothetical question about in the year following October 7th, would you have supported funding Israel's military campaign? And I said yes, because the situation has changed since then, and there's nothing inconsistent about that.
So just to be very clear, you oppose military aid to Israel right now?
Yes, as I have said multiple times on the record at forums, on my social media channels, in interviews to the press. I have absolutely thought a lot about it. And just so people wonder, it hasn't, I've managed to make, I'm right in the sweet spot where I've made everybody angry. So I'm not doing it just to please anybody.
My colleague had the opportunity to speak with Mayor Mamdani, asked him if he would endorse anyone in the race. He declined to do that. He said he's a voter in this race. How do you feel about that? Do you want Mayor Mamdani's endorsement? Is that important for you to secure?
I want the mayor to do whatever he thinks is the best thing for him and the city to succeed. I want to be a great partner for the mayor if elected. I supported the mayor. I'm the only person running who voted for him 2 times. And I would say that our policy positions compared to the field I'm running against are much closer together, though we don't agree on every issue. I am definitely much more in line with his views than my opponents. So I think he should do what he thinks is the right thing to do. Maybe that's endorse me, maybe that's someone else, maybe that's stay out, and I respect his decision.
Just finally, you are running this campaign against the backdrop of an unbelievable family tragedy. You have lost your sister, and my condolences, and the condolences on behalf of everyone here to you and your family. A lot of people would have said, I'm not going to continue with this race, and yet you have. What has kept you going while you're still grieving?
This is our country's 250th birthday. New York's turning 400 years old this year. And it's never been more clear to me that no day is guaranteed, and we don't have time right now as people who care about our country and the future of it and our party to sit back on the sidelines and watch it all burn. And I'd be lying to you if I said that President Kennedy's legacy and of his White House draft the Civil Rights Act, he sent a man to the moon. He solved the Cuban Missile Crisis without firing a shot. He supported the arts, and President Trump is dismantling that legacy that he and generations of Americans built so that we could live in this country. He's dismantling that, and I'm not just going to sit by and watch and let it happen.
All right, Jack Schlossberg, thank you so very much for
you.
being here. Good luck to you on the campaign trail. We will be tracking it. Really appreciate it. And coming up, President Trump says he, quote, does not care about the midterms when speaking to reporters about the potential political impacts of the war against Iran. We have the takeaways from today's wide-ranging cabinet meeting and where negotiations with Tehran go from here. Stay with us. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. As we mentioned, President Trump held a cabinet meeting at the White House where he addressed the ongoing negotiations with Iran, saying he was not satisfied with the state of the talks. The president also making clear he does not feel any political pressure to bring the war to an end. Listen to what he said.
Iran is very much intent. They want very much to make a deal. So far, they haven't gotten there. We're not satisfied with it, but we will be. We will be either that or we'll have to just finish the job. But their Navy is gone, as I've said 1,000 times. Their Navy is gone. Their Air Force is gone. Everything's gone, and they're negotiating on fumes. But we'll see what happens. Maybe we have to go back and finish it. Maybe we don't. They thought they were going to outweight me. We'll outweight him. He's got the midterms. I don't care about the midterms.
You've said that you're in no rush to make a deal, but with gas prices that are still high across the country, people are paying more for travel. Does that give you more urgency to make a deal? Why doesn't it?
Well, I'll tell you, the primary urgency, if I said this, it wasn't covered properly, but the primary urgency is that we can't let Iran have a nuclear weapon.
It remains unclear what exactly is in the agreement that's being negotiated. But today, Iran state media released details of what it's calling a draft document of the Memorandum of Understanding between the U.S. and Iran. In it, Iran says the U.S. will withdraw its military forces around Iran and commit to lifting its naval blockade. In return, Tehran will restore traffic through the Strait of Hormuz to pre-war levels. Now, notably, not in the draft document is mention of Iran's nuclear program. The White House responding, calling that draft document a, quote, complete fabrication. Joining me now is NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez and NBC News senior national security correspondent Kornacki. Thanks to both of you for being here. So, Gabe, what were your key takeaways from that cabinet meeting today?
Well, Kristen, you mentioned what the president had said about not caring about the midterm. Certainly that will raise a lot of eyebrows politically across the country, especially among Republicans who are trying to hold on to control of Congress. And it's reminiscent, Kristen, what the president said several weeks ago when he was asked about Americans' financial situations and how he didn't really consider that. Now, the White House will say that he was talking about this in the context of these negotiations, that he wasn't going to be pushed around by Iran, and that his main focus was on protecting Americans' national security. But certainly that raised a lot of eyebrows. The other thing, Kristen, is that when he was asked about the future of the Strait of Hormuz and whether he would find it acceptable for Iran and perhaps in coordination with Oman, which is, of course, is a U.S. ally, whether they would continue to monitor or manage traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, the president responded and said no. And then he went further and said that if Oman doesn't behave, that the U.S. would blow it up. Of course, saying that about a U.S. ally, certainly raising a lot of eyebrows as well, Kristen.
Undoubtedly did. So let's talk about what you're learning based on your conversations. Gabe, do you have a sense of what's actually being negotiated and what the key sticking points are? Obviously, we know Iran's nuclear program is at the top of the list.
Well, certainly, and you alluded to this in your introduction, but right now it's unclear exactly what's in these details. You had that draft memorandum of understanding that was released released by Iranian state media, which, of course, the White House later today had said that was a complete fabrication. But in that, the details are largely still up in the air. What the president did say today is that he wants the Strait open immediately and that the U.S. would somehow watch over it. But with regards to the Iranian nuclear program, there are a lot of questions about that. He was asked whether he would find it acceptable if another country, such as such as China or Russia, went in and helped remove the so-called nuclear dust. He said that he would not be comfortable with that. And then more broadly about this Iranian nuclear enrichment, the president had said that he would be okay with prohibiting that for, say, 20 years or so. Previously, he had talked about it, that being a prohibition on that forever. But that's some of the things that are being ironed out. And additionally, also the question of whether he wants several other Gulf countries to sign on to the Abraham Accords and to normalize relations with Israel. Certainly a tall order that came up today during the cabinet meeting with Steve Witkoff, the special envoy, right there in the meeting, the president asking him whether he was going to be able to get countries to sign on to the Abraham Accords. Steve Witkoff says, well, we're pushing it. But then the president coming back and saying that he wasn't sure that he should even sign a deal if that were not part of the agreement. Certainly a very tall order with those Gulf countries, Kristen.
Yeah, we know that a number of his allies are pushing for that as well. All right, Court, let me turn to you. We heard the president today and Secretary Hegseth both repeat their claims that Iran's military has been destroyed, but you actually have some new reporting about some remaining targets. What are you learning today, Court?
Yeah, so we know as this back and forth has continued throughout the ceasefire, and that is the U.S. and Iran in some way negotiating for some sort of an agreement here. We don't even really know exactly how this negotiated, these deals are being structured at this point. But throughout that, the U.S. military has continued to prepare for the possibility that President Trump follows through on the threat that he makes on a near daily basis to, quote, finish the job if, in fact, there is not some sort of an agreement with Iran. Now, the military has provided the White House with a number of potential targets, options to strike. But, Kristen, this is a lot different than the first 37 days or so of this war, because the U.S. was able to hit a lot of the targets that were just sort of easier at that time. So ballistic missiles and launchers and drone facilities that were out in the open. Iran took a lot of those capabilities and buried them, or in some cases they were buried by U.S. strikes. Now they've been able to reconstitute some of them, and they still pose a real threat. So the target list that the U.S. has prepared, should President Trump decide to restart combat operations, it represents a much more difficult set of targets for the U.S. military if, in fact, again, the peace deal or these negotiations don't come to some sort of an ultimate agreement, Kristen.
All right, Courtney, as always, thank you for taking us inside your latest reporting. Gabe, thank you from the White House as well. Let's turn back to the Texas-sized problem President Trump has created for Republicans. Joining me now is today's panel, Alan Smith, politics reporter for NBC News, Jay Johnson, who served as Homeland Security Secretary during the Obama administration, and Pat McCrory, former Republican governor of North Carolina. Thanks to all of you for being here to talk about these extraordinary results out of Texas. Alan, I have to start with you. For a long time, Texas has been Democrats' white whale. When I was covering the Obama administration, they were talking about maybe we can turn Texas purple. It didn't happen. Is this a cycle where Democrats actually have a shot?
So what's really interesting, Kristen, I was talking to a grassroots Democratic group earlier this month, and they said states like Alaska and Ohio were much better targets for the party than Texas. Structural challenges, all sorts of other issues that make it very difficult to win there. And that was before Trump endorsed Ken Paxton. Now Democrats are feeling much more hopeful. They feel like they've got much better chances. You've seen Cook slide the race more into Democrats' favor. And, you know, Kristen, there's just a lack of there's really a lack of competitive races that are on the table, and Dems are going to go all in on Texas now that Ken Paxton is Republicans' nominee.
I can only imagine how much is going to be spent on this race on both sides. Governor, I want to go to you and kind of talk about this divide now within the Republican Party. The NRSC, of course, will support the candidate in Texas, but they've spent months attacking Paxton. Here's a statement that they released. Ken Paxton's incompetence as Texas's chief law enforcement officer has allowed crime to run rampant across the Lone Star State. Texans deserve a leader who can keep their communities safe, not one whose mismanagement has made things worse. Can Republicans put their differences aside in this case? How do you see this playing out?
Well, first of all, I've been played by this game. 4 years ago, I had a 30-point lead in a U.S. Senate race here in North Carolina, and Trump came in and endorsed the third-place person in the polls, now U.S. Senator Ted Budd. So his influence remains the same with the base 4 years later, and it's just amazing what happened in Texas. But yes, I think they will come back together. He will lose some votes, especially to independent votes. Will it be enough to put the Democrat over? I don't know. But the biggest impact is the money game. And I know this game, too, because Schumer and Thune are going to have to make some very important decisions on where they direct their money. Will they direct it to North Carolina, to Texas, to Maine, to Ohio? And there is no loyalty with them. It's all about numbers. And they will go to the numbers where they have the best chance to get the majority. So if he says they're all in Texas, you'll find out soon as to whether the money from D.C. will go to Texas, if they're all in or not.
Well, and
whether North Carolina, whether D.C.'s money will go also to the Republican Paxton.
Yeah, that's why so many Republicans on Capitol Hill were expressing frustration, Secretary Johnson, last week. I want to ask you, because in order to win this race, the candidates are going to have to appeal to Senator Cornyn's supporters. We saw James Tallarico start that day one. That was part of his reaction last night that we got. What are you going to be watching for in terms of how each candidate is going to try to do that?
I anticipate this will be a very negative campaign. You mentioned earlier that Democrats have been talking about turning Texas purple going back years, but it's still Texas. Just a couple of years ago, a guy by the name of George P. Bush, of Hispanic descent, Navy veteran, could not beat Ken Paxton in Texas in a Republican primary. But this endorsement may have been a short-term victory for President Trump. Longer term, I think there's going to be huge fallout in the Senate over what happened to John Cornyn. John Cornyn was very much a member of that club, Mitch McConnell, Thune, and others, and they are probably very unhappy about the fact that he's basically driving him. And Cornyn was a really nice guy. I worked with him when I was cabinet secretary. He's a country club Republican, but he was a really nice guy, a real gentleman.
Well, and Alan, Cornyn made the point. He voted with Trump the vast majority of the time. The question now, is he going to become a part of this YOLO caucus, where basically he's going to try to block the Trump agenda, where he will join other Republicans, Congressman Massey, who's lining up to block what Trump puts forward potentially.
And there's been reporting that Trump has, stayed out of some House primaries because he doesn't want sitting members to be voting against him after being defeated. And now you've got at least a couple of senators, I think 3 off the top of my head, who are now in the Senate. They don't have anything to fear in terms of, retaliation from the president. And that's a really significant block when he's already got to deal with Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, who, aren't the most reliable votes for him. There's a very slim majority as it is. So this does put in peril some of the goals that he wants.
Governor, I want to ask you, because Ken Paxton's controversies have been highlighted throughout the course of this primary. The fact that he was impeached, the legal challenges against him. Senator Cornyn basically called him corrupt every day of this race. Now Republicans are trying to put the focus on James Tallarico's past comments. Are trying to paint him as woke. I want to play you part of what we heard from Ken Paxton in his speech last night.
My opponent is the most extreme radical the Democrats have ever nominated. Some people know him as Tofu Tallarico. Some people call him Six-Gender Jimmy. I've even heard some people call him James Tallarico. And others refer to him simply as Low T Tallarico.
Governor, is that going to resonate with Texas voters? How's that going to play?
I think by the end of this campaign, both candidates' negatives will be much more than their positives. The negative ads will be running forever. After a while, I think the people of Texas will quit listening to the negative ads because they've already had their impact. But negative ads do work, and I think the decision for the independents will be who's better of the worst in this election. And it's a sad commentary on where we are in politics at this point in time.
Secretary, what do you make of that? And when you hear those comments from James Tallarico, do you have concerns that could potentially make it tougher for him?
It's going to be a negative campaign without a doubt. I think the governor is right, and it's a trend line in politics that is really unfortunate. More and more you see candidates on both sides from extremes who are being nominated, leaving voters in the middle with a very, very difficult choice. They throw up their hands, and I think the governor's right. Their negatives are going to overwhelm their positives by the time of the general election.
Alan, let me ask you big picture. We've been watching this redistricting race play out throughout the course of this year. Yesterday, we saw setbacks for Republicans in Alabama and South Carolina after they had a series of wins, quite frankly. How does that play in the broader map that you're watching?
I mean, the South Carolina one is so interesting to me because the idea that they did not pass this map is almost a signal that they're worried if you were to break up Jim Clyburn's district, there's a chance that Democrats could actually pick up seats in South Carolina. And that's because they, just like we do, they know what the environment is right now. This is going to be a really tough cycle, at least at this moment, for Republicans. And I know that we had President Trump earlier saying, he's not worried about the midterms in the context of dealing with Iran. But I think a lot of these guys are pretty concerned.
Secretary Johnson, how do you see the redistricting battle?
So what happened yesterday in South Carolina kind of lays bare something that Democrats don't really like to talk about out loud, which is, yes, we can pump up the numbers of Congressional Black Caucus members, but at the same time in the South, you're gerrymandering all the Democrats into one congressional district. So you saw in the early 90s, the numbers of CBC members escalate dramatically. But at the same time was the Gingrich Revolution. 1994, Republicans took over the House for the first time in 40 years. And I'm sure those two events were related.
All right. Well, look, this was a great conversation. We're going to continue to watch the redistricting battle. We're going to watch what happens in Texas very closely. Thank you for being here to talk about it. Alan, Secretary Johnson, Governor McCrory, really appreciate the conversation. We are back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. There is much more ahead on NBC News Now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.